Well, welcome back to One Audacious Move. Of course, I'm starting by filling out my next week on my Life in Weeks board. You know, my mom came into town this past weekend, and I'll tell you why here in a second. And I brought this up. We were talking about life. We were talking about the brevity of life, and I brought this up to show her, and she did not like this. She did not like this exposure so viscerally to where you're at in your life. And so I'm 33 years into this, and she is just over 60 into it. I don't know if she'd appreciate me saying her age, but age is a real thing. I like talking about it. And I mean, you can see the difference in if your life was filled in down here. That would show a lot of your life lived. And that kind of started a conversation between us because I tend to talk about death a lot more than most people. I also tend to probably talk about life a lot more than other people, but this conversation started in particular, and I also brought out my Life in Weeks board because of the topic of death. Because to be honest, and she notices this, and this is why we were talking about it, I talk about death a lot more than most people. And I think it's a really good thing to think about the realistic fact that our life is coming to an end at some point. Probably sooner than we think it is. Kind of think maybe, oh, this is how much time I have left, but it could be this week that I'm not here anymore, which would suck a lot. But it could be 90. It could be more than this. You know, I could live to be older than 90. I'm not exactly sure if I want to or not, but I think it's a really good thing to be thinking about this thing that our society, our culture, people in our life tend to shy away from talking about. And that's talking about the realistic fact just as much as it's real and true and worth noting that we are alive. I think it's good to think about the fact that we won't be here one day. And I don't think it has to be this morbid thing. I think that, of course, it's something we enjoy life. And that's the whole reason I think about death. It's the contrast that is beautiful to me, is that I will not be able to experience and enjoy the beauty of life one day. So that's why I talk about death. That's why I think about the fact that I'm not going to be here anymore. When I think about it, it makes me live the present more fully. It makes me take audacious moves. It makes me take away that in-between time that I might be dilly-dallying and say, holy crap, I get one shot at this. I better go do it now, because if I keep putting it off, I might never get to that. I might never get to experience that. And that would be disappointing, not being able to enact the beauty that is available to each of us in this life. And so I want to start off, as I like to do a lot of times, and just ask you for a self-reflection question. What's something you could do this week in your life, whether it's big or small, in light of the fact that you're not going to be here for very long. You're not going to be here forever, even though that might hurt you to think about. I think it's a healthy practice to instill to make you think about the present moment, that you are alive. At least you're alive now. What are you holding on to inside of you? What's a buried dream? What's a big move you're wanting to make? What's something hard that you maybe have been putting off living in comfort that you need to go ahead and do? Because now is the time. Now is the time to do it. That's how I try to live my life. I don't necessarily do that perfectly, but it is something that, especially being the host of this podcast, that I think about often, at least once a week, often many times more than that. What can I do right now that would bring out the beauty of what I know to be inside of me? And so this week was kind of a different move for me than the other weeks, where sometimes for the other weeks, I would start the week and I would do something for that week based off of what I said I was going to do during the podcast. But this was something, and this will happen throughout this series of making this podcast. This was something that has been inside of me for a while, something I've been training for, preparing for, something that was big and scary and intimidating, something that I was not good at, something that was really hard for me to decide to do. And that was running a marathon. You know, just a week or two before I started this podcast back in February, I was at the gym, I was working out, and I just kind of got curious. There's a section of the gym that I never go over to, and it was the treadmill section. I might have talked about this on the podcast before, but I walked over there and I got on the treadmill. I set it at an 8.5 minute mile pace, meaning that it takes me 8.5 minutes if I ran for that long to go 1 mile. And I didn't run for 8.5 minutes. I got on there, never run before, got on a treadmill, decided to try it out. I ran for 2 minutes and I got off because I was lightheaded. I ran for 2 minutes and I got off because I was out of breath. I couldn't run anymore. And to me, that was concerning. I feel like most people could look at me and say, oh, well, you look like somebody that could at least run. But just because I have this natural skinny form factor does not mean that my body is in shape. And so that was a wake-up call to me. For a few other reasons as well, I decided that I didn't want to stay in that kind of shape. And so I needed something big to push me. In my world, I have the whole ideology of go big or go home. I like setting big goals and doing my best to live up to them, because when you set big goals, you're going to get a lot further than if you set small or more achievable goals that were easier for you to get to. It's almost like how Grant Cardone talks about, if you want to sell a certain amount of a product, let's say it's 100 units of some kind of product. Well, say that you're going to sell 10,000 of those and come up with a plan to sell 10,000 of those. And you're going to hit your number of 100 pretty easily, because everything you're doing is trying to get to 10,000, but your goal in the beginning, the one that was going to actually maybe financially fill your cup or help the business continue forward, was 100 of those. But by setting up systems and practices to get to 10,000, you achieve that other goal. And so it kind of was the same thing with me with signing up for this marathon. I wanted to get healthy. I wanted to get in shape. I do like setting big goals. And so in order to get myself out there, I needed to set a big goal. I needed to set up something that was going to be hard for me to do, to get this ball rolling, to have something to work toward. And in the process of setting this really big goal, I would get in shape. I would take care of myself. And, going back to that analogy with Grant Cardone, maybe that person didn't completely get to that 10,000 units sold mark, but they got a long ways in getting close to that goal. They overachieved on the other goal. Maybe they sold 500 units because they were going for 10,000, or maybe they sold 9,000, or maybe they exceeded that goal. But my goal with this was to set an unimaginably hard goal, one that getting off that treadmill after running for 2 minutes seemed as hard as trying to go to the moon. But I knew it was something that I could do if I put the work in, if I pushed myself. And so I set this big goal and I started working toward it. And so from late February, early March until now, I did everything I could to get in marathon shape. That's a pretty small timeline to be getting in shape to run a marathon. But long story short, it went decently well up until about mid-April. And then all of a sudden I was going on my second to last long run before I start tapering down before the marathon. And I was going for 18 miles that day, which is crazy that I'd even progressed that far. But my body was paying the price for progressing so quickly. And I only made it 10 miles into that and ended up limping my way home, was on crutches for a few days, icing my knee. 17 days of this small window of 10 weeks of training up until the marathon was taken up by this knee injury. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to run it. But eventually that knee pain went away with a lot of stretching, Epsom salt baths, icing, you name it, just taking care of myself and resting during those 17 days. I was able to get back up on the bandwagon and continue forward with my training. And so it didn't look exactly how I wanted it to. But fast forwarding to yesterday when I ran a marathon. Oh man, what a cool experience. I'm not a runner. Maybe I am now. I don't know, but I've never considered myself one. I don't consider myself to be one now, even though I did run a marathon. But what an incredible experience to see yourself do something that you couldn't have done a couple of months before, to see yourself do something that you put the work in for, to see yourself do something that is really hard. There was so many people at this marathon here in Denver, the Colfax Marathon. I'm convinced it's the biggest event in Denver. Maybe there's a bigger one. Thousands upon thousands of people, an incredibly well-organized event. This whole process of training for a marathon is so individual. It's so on your shoulders. It's all about you. And the whole reason you're running that marathon is because this is your journey. At the same time, you're a drop in the bucket and nobody cares that you're there running. But at the same time, everybody's so kind. The energy's so amazing. And it's this incredible experience where you get to run your race alongside other people and give it your all and see the payoff of your training. And even though it hurts, even if you took all your hydration and your gels properly along that run, you're going to hit a wall somewhere near the end of that. Even though it gets hard, you still cross that finish line. You still keep going. I had to walk at certain points because I'd never run that far. My training was a super condensed time period of how long somebody would typically take to train for running for a marathon. But all that to say, my second question to you, aside from my first one of what's one audacious move you can take this week, is what is something hard that you can give yourself to do in life? Are you giving yourself anything challenging to do in life? And I'm not saying I'm the purveyor of hard things that I constantly turning over every stone, trying to make my life difficult. I'm not trying to make my life difficult, but I think that tension, that dissonance between the comfort that we normally feel in our life, it makes us grow. and I want you to grow, and I want myself to grow. So what's something hard you could sign up for or start doing or change in your life? What's a hard decision that you can make in your life? And that's really the only thing I want to talk about on this podcast today is doing hard things, getting out of the comfort that we feel like is all that we want to work toward in our life, and creating friction in our life on purpose, creating something that's going to upset the typical way that we go through life. Are you happy with everything about the way that you're living your life, your health, your mental health, your finances, your relationships, what you're doing with your time? Are you happy with all of that? Like I like to say all the time, and I don't care if it sounds cheesy to you, you always have the power to make a decision that's going to make you a better and more full version of yourself. You always have that power. Moreover, when we choose to do those hard things, we start to see and reveal things about ourselves that we maybe didn't know were there, or maybe is a reminder to us of a past self that was something that we used to do or something that we used to be like. It reveals parts of yourself. And so just talking about this marathon, seeing what I had in me to do something that was so outside of my comfort zone, so brand new to me, so different than anything that I've ever done. And I just arbitrarily decided I was going to do it. I wanted to say that I've done a marathon in my life. I wanted to say that that was something that I've done before. And so something that I did, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to count this as an audacious move, but when I got home last night, I loved the idea. I loved what happened in my life whenever I said that I was going to run a marathon. I loved where it brought me. And I said, I need to do this again. I need to continue pushing myself to do hard things that defy logic, things that don't make sense to other people, because they make me excited. They motivate me to go out there and live my life the way that I feel like I need to be living it. And so when I got home from the marathon, after I took a bath, after I ate some food, took a little nap, went outside on the porch and I opened up my laptop and I signed up for an ultramarathon, 62.13 miles, 100K, 100 kilometers. And I mean, you can compare running on a treadmill for 2 minutes at an 8.5 minute mile pace to a marathon. But going from a marathon to an ultra marathon, to me, is vastly more intimidating. 62 miles, that's over double of what I've done already. That is so much distance. 60 miles, 100 kilometers. It's a 20-ish mile loop 3 times. And it's here in the Denver, Colorado area. And now I have something else to work toward outside the marathon. And it's not because I was trying to avoid this thing that I guess people talk about. It's called the post-marathon blues. It's because I loved what I saw come alive in myself by doing this marathon. I loved what I learned about myself during this process, what was revealed to me. And the cool thing is that I know that this sensation is not just unique to running, that no matter what you choose, if it's hard for you, if it pulls you out of your comfort zone, if it's something that you feel called to, you're going to find things out about yourself along that journey that reveal beautiful things about who you are and why you're here. That's what running the marathon did for me. And I want to keep revealing things about myself to myself. What's interesting about the human experience is we live in our bodies and we're very accustomed to the way that we do things. At the same time, if we're really honest with ourselves, it takes one therapy session, go talk to a therapist, and you realize how little you actually know about yourself, why you do the things that you do. Yes, you can kind of trace things back to your childhood, but you quickly learn during a therapy session that you have tendencies and ways that you move through the world and worldviews based off of certain unnamed things that through pulling back the layers, talking to a therapist can actually help reveal to you. And so I just keep bringing up a therapist because that was kind of one of the more eye-opening times of my life of how little I actually knew about myself. I was just kind of accustomed to who I was. I had accepted who I was. And that began a journey for me of realizing, there's a lot going on underneath the hood here. And I'm kind of humming on this surface level existence, going through life, being comfortable, just living according to the predisposition, the way that I was raised. But what if I kept pulling back the layers? What if I kept trying to reveal the mystery of what's going on inside of me? And I think that's what's been revealed to me over the last few years, is how much of a mystery I am. And so by going and doing things in this world, by growing and getting out of the patterns that I typically live my life in, just because that's the way I've been doing it, when I get out of that, I see a different side of myself. And that different side of myself is something that is being revealed to me within me. It's really beautiful. You know, as adults, we often struggle to do new things, to try new things, to do hard things outside of what we need to do to survive. When we were kids, it's just kind of programmed into how our culture works, but we try so many new things, but all of a sudden we have to pay bills and take care of our own kids and, you know, deal with a relationship with a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend or take care of a dog, whatever it might be. And all of a sudden that desire, that frivolity goes away, that curiosity about what if I tried this? What if I did this? What if I challenged myself to do something hard? Because we actually do that a lot more when we were kids than we think. We just didn't equate it to being hard when we were a kid or something that we were bad at. It was this curiosity of wanting to be better at something or do something, I think, that leads us. And it was this curiosity of wanting to be better or learn how to do something that led us into trying new things and getting better at new things. So can we adopt that same mindset as adults? Can we go and do things out of curiosity? Can I actually run a marathon? Do I have what it takes? Well, let me go see. At worst, I can't finish and I have to deal with that and train for another one or move on to something else that maybe I feel called to. At best, I learn a lot about myself in the process and I get bit by a bug that I actually enjoy it because truth be told, you could talk to any of my friends when I talked about, you know, athleticism and doing sports or something. Running has always been my least favorite thing. And I told myself if I could pick something, obviously there's multiple layers to why I chose to do this. And I keep kind of hitting on different ones. I told myself, if I can do this, I can do anything. If I can do the thing that I hate doing the most, I can train a muscle inside of me to do more things that I don't hate as much. And that'll be a really good thing in my life. That'll be a good trait to instill into me. So what's something hard you could do that could push you to become a more full version of yourself, even if it's maybe something that you don't like to do that you know would be good for you? What is that thing? What is that thing that you could do this week? Guys, I love speaking about Audacity every week. I love challenging myself every week. And I hope that you're enjoying this podcast, not because I'm some guru, but just because I'm a guy going through life with you guys, learning along the way how Audacity will bring beauty out of myself into this world and make my life so much more full in the face of the fact that this is happening, that every week a little bubble gets filled in, that my life is going to end one day. I'm so lucky to be alive. I'm so lucky to be here living life. And so are you. You're not here to go to work, come back, eat dinner, and watch Netflix and do that over and over again until you retire at 65 and sit on a beach drinking margaritas and go play golf in the afternoon. There's some beautiful things about that in regards to relaxation and comfort and doing those things from time to time. But that is not why you're here. You have to exercise the muscle of uncomfortability and pushing yourself to become, in the face of resistance, in the face of what everybody's telling you to do, to step up to the plate of life, get into the arena, and decide to live life boldly and something that you can look back on with no regret, knowing you gave it your all, that you gave it your all. And regardless of the fact that maybe you fail along the way at some things, you're just going to try. You're just going to try because most people don't try and they get to the end of their life and they wish that they did. The whole point of this Audacity is so that you can live a beautiful life and live a life where you don't look back at your life with the regret that you did the most with this one freaking shot that you have at being alive. That's what gets me stoked. And that's why I like talking about death, because it calls me into life. Guys, thank you so much for listening or watching One Audacious Move this week. Hey, something that I'm starting this week and we'll probably start putting into practice next week on next week's podcast is taking a listener's story of some audacious move they took, big or small, whether that's submitted on a website that I'm about to have done, or you DM it to me, text it to me if you're a friend or have my phone number, and let me know what is one tiny, big, bold, risky, hard, uncomfortable, audacious move that you've made in your life. Doesn't matter how big or small it is. I'd love to hear how you're stepping up to the plate of life, how you're stepping into the arena and making tiny micro adjustments so you can carve a life out that inspires you and fulfills you in this life. If you have a story of some time in your life where you've been audacious, or maybe an audacious move that you've taken since listening to this podcast, hit me up. I'd love to hear it. And maybe we'll share that on an upcoming week's episode of One Audacious Move. Thanks for listening to this week. This week's audacious move is something that I will reveal in the next week's episode, but it's something along the same lines of running, but with a really fun, unique, let's just go for it because this is weird and fun twist. It's going to be fun to talk about. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you guys next week.